Elena Marrow smiled as the wedding lights faded, but inside her mind, a decision had already been made. Maribel Cruz believed marriage would finally give her freedom, unaware that her quiet rejection had awakened something dangerous. Caleb Marrow stood between love and loyalty, not knowing the night would steal both from him forever. What happened after the last guest left was not an accident, not fate, and not a mistake. It was planned in silence, hidden behind family smiles and perfect wedding photos. This is not just a crime story, it is a warning about control, obsession, and betrayal. Watch till the end, because the truth behind this wedding night will change everything you thought you knew. The wedding looked like something taken straight out of a dream. Soft golden lights hung above the outdoor venue, glowing gently as the sun disappeared behind the California hills. White chairs were lined perfectly in rows, and fresh roses filled the air with a sweet scent. Guests arrived dressed in elegant clothes, smiling, laughing, and recording videos on their phones. From the outside, it appeared to be the beginning of a beautiful love story, one that people would talk about for years in a positive way. Maribel Cruz stood at the center of that attention. She looked calm and graceful, her smile steady, her posture confident. Many guests admired her strength, especially knowing she had built her life far from her home country. She had faced cultural differences, long-distance struggles, and quiet judgment, yet she stood there proudly as a bride. To most people, she represented hope, patience, and a fresh start. But not everyone was smiling from the heart. Elena Marrow sat in the front row, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Her face showed no excitement, no visible joy, only a controlled and unreadable expression. She watched everything closely, not just the ceremony, but the people, the movements, and especially Maribel. While others wiped tears of happiness, Elena's eyes remained dry and sharp, as if she was studying something rather than celebrating it. Some guests noticed her cold presence, but brushed it off. They assumed she was simply a strict woman or someone who struggled to express emotions. No one thought much of it, because she behaved politely. She followed every social rule. She smiled when required. She clapped when others clapped. On the surface, she looked like a proud mother watching her son get married. Yet there was a heavy feeling in the air, something subtle but unsettling. As the ceremony continued, the camera lenses captured laughter and applause, but they also captured small details that would later feel disturbing. Elena never once leaned toward Maribel. She never adjusted the bride's dress or showed the gentle affection often expected from a mother-in-law. Instead, she kept her distance, her body stiff, her eyes calculating. Maribel sensed it too, even while smiling for the guests. She had felt that same tension for months leading up to the wedding. It was not loud or aggressive, but quiet and constant, like pressure that never released. She believed marriage would finally bring peace. She believed once the wedding was over, things would naturally improve. The reception that followed was lively. Plates of food filled the tables, glasses were raised, and music echoed across the venue. People danced, recorded stories, and shared congratulations. It was a kind of night that looked perfect on social media, a night people would envy. But beneath that perfection, something was slowly forming. Elena moved through the crowd carefully, greeting guests, maintaining her composed image. She never rushed. She never appeared nervous. Every step she took looked planned, as if she already knew exactly how the night would unfold. To anyone watching casually, she seemed calm and proud. To someone watching closely, she seemed focused. Maribel tried to enjoy the moment. She laughed with friends and thanked relatives. She allowed herself to believe that this was the end of her worries. The wedding was over. The hard part was done. What she did not realize was that the wedding was not the ending. It was the beginning. As the night went on, the energy slowly shifted. The music softened, guests began leaving, and the celebration turned quiet. The bright lights dimmed, and shadows grew longer. What remained was a strange stillness, almost too calm for such an important night. Elena watched that calm settle in. No one noticed the way she observed Maribel one last time. No one noticed how her expression changed, not into anger, but into something far more dangerous, certainty. By the time the final guests left and the venue began to empty, the perfect wedding already carried a secret. A secret no one was ready for. A secret that would soon turn celebration into shock, love into loss, and a joyful wedding night into the start of a crime that would leave an entire nation asking how no one saw it coming. And the night was still young long before the wedding decorations were chosen and the invitations were sent. Tension had already settled into the Marrow household. It was quiet tension, the kind that did not involve shouting or open arguments, but instead lived in silence, side glances, and carefully chosen words. Elena Marrow had always been a woman who believed control was love. She had spent decades shaping every part of her son's life, from his habits to his decisions, and she expected that control to continue even after marriage. Maribel Cruz disrupted that expectation without raising her voice or showing disrespect. Her resistance was calm and firm. She believed marriage meant building a new life, not stepping into an old one. She wanted a home of her own, a space where she could breathe freely and grow without constant observation. To her, this was reasonable. To Elena, it felt like rejection. The moment Maribel made her decision, something inside Elena shifted. There was no dramatic reaction, no emotional outburst. Instead, Elena grew quieter. She listened more. She watched more. And she began to plan. Outwardly, she appeared accepting. She nodded during conversations and kept her tone neutral. She even helped with small wedding arrangements when asked. Anyone looking from the outside would believe she had simply adjusted to the idea. But behind that calm surface, her thoughts were sharp and focused. She saw Maribel not as a daughter-in-law, but as a threat to everything she believed she owned. Elena began to collect information. She paid attention to routines, habits, and preferences. She learned what Maribel liked to drink, what food she avoided, and what she trusted. She remembered details others ignored. These details slowly became tools that at the same time, she convinced herself that she was the one being wronged. In her mind, Maribel was not asking for independence. She was stealing a son. Elena replayed moments from the past, twisting them into proof of disrespect. Every polite refusal became an insult. Every boundary became an act of defiance. This internal narrative fed her anger while keeping her image clean. She did not appear bitter or hostile. Instead, she appeared patient. She waited. As the wedding approached, Elena's behavior seemed almost improved. She stopped making passive remarks. She stopped offering unwanted advice. This sudden change surprised Maribel and even brought a sense of relief. For the first time in months, things felt calm. The pressure seemed to lift. But calm does not always mean peace. Elena used that calm to test limits. She offered help, small gestures that seemed harmless. She positioned herself as supportive and reasonable. Slowly, trust began to form, not because Maribel wanted it, but because the tension had been exhausting. Meanwhile, Elena's resentment deepened. She began seeing the wedding not as a celebration, but as a deadline. A point of no return. Once the marriage happened, her control would be gone forever. The thought felt unbearable. She researched quietly, choosing moments when no one was watching. She avoided anything obvious. Her searches were careful. Her actions measured. She believed intelligence meant silence, and silence meant safety. The rejection haunted her most at night. She replayed it again and again, convincing herself that she had been humiliated, that she had been pushed aside in her own family. In those moments, she justified thoughts she never imagined having before, thoughts that crossed lines most people would never consider. By the time the wedding day arrived, Elena had already made peace with her decision. She believed she was restoring balance. She believed she was protecting her family. In her mind, she was not becoming a villain. She was correcting a mistake. Maribel walked into the wedding day believing the worst was behind her. She thought boundaries had been accepted. She thought the tension had faded. She allowed herself to feel hopeful. She never realized that her quiet rejection had planted a seed that had been watered with resentment, protected by silence, and allowed to grow unchecked. And as the wedding approached, that seed was ready to bloom. The wedding night unfolded slowly, wrapped in exhaustion and emotion. After hours of smiling, greeting guests, and standing under bright lights, Maribel finally found herself away from the noise. The celebration had drained her energy, but her heart felt light. The hardest part of her journey seemed complete, and she believed the future was finally within reach. The hotel suite was quiet, filled with soft lighting and the distant hum of the city outside. Everything felt calm, almost unreal after the crowded venue. Maribel changed out of her wedding dress, her movements slow and careful. She tried to relax, believing this moment marked the beginning of a peaceful chapter of her life. What she did not know was that something had already been set in motion. Earlier that evening, small choices had been made that seemed harmless at the time. A drink offered with a polite smile. A gesture that appeared thoughtful. Nothing about it felt suspicious. Weddings were full of shared moments like that, and Maribel had no reason to doubt the people around her. As time passed, her body began to react. At first, it was subtle. A sudden wave of dizziness. A tightness in her chest that came and went. She assumed it was fatigue, maybe stress finally catching up after such an emotional day. She tried to steady herself, believing rest would solve everything. But the feeling did not pass. Her vision blurred slightly, and her breathing became shallow. The room seemed to tilt, as if the floor was no longer stable. Panic slowly replaced calm, as she realized something was wrong. Her body felt heavy, unresponsive, as though strength was draining from her limbs without explanation. Within minutes, her condition worsened. Nausea followed, then sharp pain that spread quickly. Her heart raced, then slowed in unsettling rhythm. Every second felt longer than the last. The quiet room now felt suffocating, the walls closing in as her body struggled to keep up. Emergency services were contacted, and paramedics arrived with urgency. Their movements were fast and professional, but confusion crossed their faces. There were no clear signs of injury, no visible wounds, no obvious explanation. Her vital signs dropped rapidly, despite every effort to stabilize her. The timeline was frighteningly short. By the time she was transported, her condition had become critical. Doctors worked through the night, running tests, checking for allergic reactions, underlying conditions, and stress-related complications. Nothing made sense. Maribel had been healthy. There was no known medical history that could explain such a sudden collapse. Hours later, the unthinkable happened. The news spread quietly at first, then exploded into shock. A bride had died on her wedding night. The story felt unreal, almost impossible to accept. Family members struggled to process what had happened. Friends replayed the night in their minds, searching for signs they might have missed. The hotel room became a place of investigation. Everything was documented, photographed, and analyzed. Cups, glasses, and personal items were collected. Yet nothing stood out. There was no mess, no evidence of a struggle. The scene looked peaceful, as if nothing violent had occurred. Many believed it was a tragic medical mystery, a rare condition triggered by stress, a sudden and unavoidable failure of the body. The idea offered comfort because it removed blame. It allowed people to grieve without asking hard questions. But questions remained. One detail troubled investigators: the speed. Healthy people did not deteriorate that quickly without a cause. The way her symptoms escalated suggested something external, something introduced into her system. Quietly, the possibility of poisoning was considered, though it seemed unlikely at first. After all, who would harm a bride on her wedding night? As the night turned into morning, the joy of the wedding completely disappeared. Social media posts celebrating love were replaced with messages of disbelief. The event that had drawn people together now left them stunned and fearful. And somewhere, not far from the hospital, Elena Marrow slept calmly. While the world searched for answers, she showed no signs of panic. No tears. No visible shock. To those who noticed, her stillness seemed strange. To everyone else, it was grief. But beneath that stillness was a secret that had already sealed Maribel's fate. The investigation began quietly, almost cautiously, as if everyone involved was afraid of what they might uncover. At first, authorities treated Maribel's death as a medical anomaly. Sudden deaths did happen, and the absence of violence made it easier to believe this was a tragic accident. Still, procedure demanded certainty, and that certainty would come from the autopsy. Dr. Simon Hargreave approached the case with precision and patience. Years of experience had taught him that the most dangerous clues were often the ones that left no visible mark. As he examined Maribel's body, he noted how unusually fast her systems had shut down. Her organs showed signs of extreme stress, not from disease, but from something that had overwhelmed them all at once. Blood samples were taken, Tissue was tested. At first, the results appeared normal. But something felt wrong. The pattern did not match a natural cause. Dr. Hargreave ordered deeper toxicology screening, the kind reserved for rare and complex cases. That decision changed everything. Hidden within the results was a toxin derived from a plant not commonly found in food or medicine. It was subtle, fast-acting, and incredibly difficult to detect without specific testing. The dosage suggested careful measurement, not accident. This was not contamination. This was intent. Once the findings were confirmed, the case shifted instantly. What had been labeled a tragedy was now officially a homicide. Investigators returned to the wedding night, replaying every detail from the beginning. They reviewed security footage, guest movements, and timelines. They traced Maribel's final hours minute by minute, focusing on anything that entered her body. Food, drinks, supplements, ceremonial traditions. One item stood out. A small drink Maribel had consumed earlier in the evening, presented as part of a private family gesture. It was not served by staff. It was not shared by other guests. It had come from someone she trusted enough not to question. That detail narrowed the list of suspects dramatically. Investigators examined who had access to the toxin. It was not easy to obtain. It required knowledge, research, and patience. Digital records were reviewed. Purchases were traced. Online activity was analyzed. What they found painted a disturbing picture. Elena Marrow's search history revealed weeks of quiet research. Information about plant-based toxins. Dosage calculations. Methods that left minimal trace. Some data had been deleted, but not well enough. Enough remained to show a clear pattern of preparation. Her purchases raised even more suspicion. Items ordered separately, from different sources, to avoid attention. Everything was calculated. Nothing was impulsive. As authorities dug deeper, Elena's behavior after Maribel's death came under scrutiny. She had shown no visible panic, no confusion. Her statements were measured and consistent, almost rehearsed. While others were overwhelmed with grief, she appeared composed, controlled, and distant. Witnesses began recalling small details they had ignored before. Her constant observation during the wedding. Her presence near Maribel at specific moments. Her sudden shift from resistance to cooperation in the weeks leading up to the ceremony. Individually, those details meant little. Together, they formed a clear and chilling narrative. When confronted with the evidence, Elena maintained her calm. She denied wrongdoing, insisting she had only wanted the best for her family. But the evidence did not rely on emotion. It relied on facts. Digital trails. Toxicology reports. Timelines that could not be explained away. The truth became impossible to ignore. The woman who appeared to be a quiet, controlling mother had executed a plan designed to look like fate. She believed intelligence would protect her. She believed silence would erase suspicion. She underestimated science. News of the findings spread rapidly. Media outlets seized on the shocking twist. A wedding night death was tragic. A murder committed by the groom's mother was unthinkable. Public opinion shifted from sorrow to outrage almost overnight. For investigators, the case was no longer about how Maribel died. That question had been answered. The only question left was how a desire for control had turned into a calculated act of murder. And as the walls closed in around Elena Marrow, one truth became painfully clear. The poison had not only ended a life, it had exposed a darkness that had been hiding in plain sight all along. The arrest came quietly, without chaos or resistance. Elena Marrow was taken into custody weeks after the wedding, long after the flowers had wilted and the headlines had already shaken the nation. By then, the shock had settled into a heavy reality. What was once whispered as suspicion had become confirmed truth. The case was no longer a mystery. It was a calculated betrayal. As the news broke, the story spread rapidly across the country. A groom's mother accused of poisoning her Filipina daughter-in-law on her wedding night captured public attention in a way few cases ever had. People struggled to understand how a moment meant to symbolize love and unity had ended in death. The contrast between celebration and crime made the story impossible to ignore. Investigators revealed the motive clearly: control. Elena had been unable to accept losing authority over her son's life. Maribel's refusal to live under her roof was not seen as independence, but as humiliation. In Elena's mind, the marriage represented permanent loss, and she chose a permanent solution. Court documents detailed weeks of preparation, the careful research, the measured dosage, the decision to act on a night when suspicion would be least expected. The prosecution painted a picture of patience turned deadly, of resentment disguised as calm. Every piece of evidence reinforced the same conclusion: this was not an accident, and it was not sudden. During the trial, the courtroom remained silent as the details were presented. Photographs from the wedding appeared on screens, showing smiling faces frozen in time. The same images that once symbolized joy now felt haunting. Each one carried the weight of what would happen only hours later. Elena showed little emotion as the case unfolded. Her expression remained steady, her posture controlled. To many watching, that composure felt unsettling. It did not look like remorse. It looked like acceptance. She had crossed a line she could never return from, and she seemed to understand that fully. When the verdict was delivered, it brought no relief. Justice, in this case, did not undo the damage. Maribel's family had lost a daughter. Caleb Marrow had lost his wife and the mother he once trusted. A future had been erased before it ever had a chance to begin. Elena was sentenced to life in prison, where control no longer existed. The same need for dominance that had driven her actions now left her isolated and powerless. The world she tried to protect was gone, destroyed by her own hands. Public reaction was intense. Many saw Maribel's story as a warning, a reminder that danger does not always come from strangers. Sometimes it hides behind polite smiles, family titles, and quiet behavior. The case sparked conversations about control, boundaries, and the unseen pressures faced by women who marry into families that refuse to let go. Maribel Cruz became more than a victim. She became a symbol of resilience and quiet strength. Her story reminded people that setting boundaries is not wrong, even when it angers those who seek control. Her life, though short, left an impact far greater than anyone expected. The wedding photos still exist online, untouched by time. They show a beautiful bride, glowing with hope, unaware of what awaited her. To viewers, those images now feel unsettling. They represent how easily truth can hide behind appearances. This case remains one of the most chilling examples of how obsession with control can turn love into violence. A mother's inability to let go led to irreversible loss. A celebration became a crime scene. A future became a memory. And as the story ends, one question continues to haunt everyone who hears it. How many warning signs were missed, simply because the danger looked so ordinary?